Welcome back to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast. We are so glad you're here with us today. Today's guest, man, this is going to be a great conversation. He's a Bulgarian-born author and frontline worker based in the UK. He has spent the last 12 years working with some of the most vulnerable people in the country, homeless youth, freshly arrived asylum seekers, and currently men on probation for the UK's Ministry of Justice. He's the author of several books on men's work, trauma, and recovery. His latest, which we're going to talk about, Rise from the Ashes, is a practical four-step guide for anyone, men or women, feeling stuck, lost, or buried between the weight of their past. 1 hour a week can change your life. George Stoimenov, I hope I pronounced it right. Welcome to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast, man. We're so glad to have you here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Man, I'll tell you what, we are going to go jump in, deep dive, but to give our conversation a little bit of perspective, share a little bit about your past and your journey from leaving the communism in Bulgaria and how you end up in the UK.
Okay, yes, I'll be happy to. And it's a bit of a long story, and there are many aspects to it. So feel free to stop me and ask a question. Otherwise, we just keep going. So interesting. I was born in 1984, which is right before communism collapsed in '89, but it didn't really go away until the early '90s. It was a very chaotic time in many ways. It was very amazingly exciting time because in the 90s, especially mid 90s, old American movies and television came in. And so I grew up with that. You could say I had a very free spirit in many ways. I was open to everything. But at the same time, almost every week, I would say, on the news, you would see and hear about some mafia boss being gunned down or bombed, like blown away in the city somewhere. So there was lots of organized crime, a lot of chaos. And I grew up in many ways under that. My dad was a working class hero. He was a blue collar hero in many ways. Back in his 30s, he was not happy with the amount of money he was and opportunities he was getting. So he went to work in Russia, not just in Russia. It was Soviet Union at the time, but in Siberia. So he spent 6 years in Siberia, which is very hard work, working on all sorts of working with hardened criminals, some of them on death row. So they would let the criminals, like the prisoners, out during the day for them to work. And then at night, they go back to prison on their own accord because they would freeze to death out there. There's nowhere to go. So that's the 6 years that my father spent. My mom says to this day that those times really shaped him. He was very jumpy when he came back. He was, she said I couldn't wake him up if he dozed off watching television because he would just jump. And, as a boy, every boy, I believe, has masculinity, like a seed of masculinity inside of him. And the father is the first and primary caregiver of that. So when the boy is old enough to start looking towards the man, because in the first few years, he's just mommy. And so, of course, you need the physical care and attention of your mother. And so I did, but I remember looking to my dad and it's like, wow, he's a hero. He's a great man. Everyone says how great my dad is because he was very unusual. He was very much a man's man. He was the life of the party, but he was not a bully. He didn't go out drinking and getting in fights. He was a family man. He would come home, and yet he had a dangerous edge to it. People say, "Oh yeah, your dad. Nobody messes with your dad." And so I kind of worship him a little bit. I'm like, wow, he's a good man. He always told me, never steal, never lie. All of this, like really unusual kind of moral, I guess, laws. And but one thing that I didn't have from him was intimacy. So I loved him and admired him, but almost like from a distance. And he would sit me down and teach me like a teacher, like a master. But we never had that intimacy that you see boys play with daddy and wrestle. We never had any of that. I was frozen. I felt my masculinity was frozen. I remember very early on in life, actually, I was frozen around other boys, especially boys who are more rough and more had that edge, that competitive edge, more masculine boys, you could say. I was frozen around them. I was more at peace around people who weren't like that and around girls. And so I guess later on, the same phenomenon of being frozen around men and masculinity. I remember being in my 20s working as a doorman. I'm just going to skip forward a little bit just to give you that idea. And then one of my friends, he came to show me something on his phone, one of my other bouncer friends. And then he leaned on me with his elbow. And I remember again, I froze. And I was aware of that. I was thinking, whoa, my goodness, no matter how much I try to change myself for the last decade or so, I'm still feeling like a frozen little boy around men, especially like more manly men. But that's just to give you a picture of where I've been and where I went. And now to go back chronologically a little bit, how I came to England was very interesting. I never wanted to. I never was one of those people. Long story short, I was not I guess what I'm trying to say, I was not a hard worker. Now, there are many people who worked hard, like my dad. He would go to another country just to earn money, and then he would come home. And because in a way we do sometimes rebel against our fathers, we either become like them sometimes or just the total opposite. My dad would wake up, he had held the same job for like decades. He retired very early with a big pension. To this day he's enjoying that. He would wake up in the morning without an alarm, no clocks, no breakfast, no water. Like I drink lots of water. I never saw him. Just have a cigarette and go to work. Never complained. I don't even remember him being sick, to be honest. I, on the other hand, went to university. I had the opportunity, not because I was that bright or I wanted to be that bright. It's just because I just didn't want to work. I didn't want to go to the army, which at the time was like I had to serve 1 year. At my father's, in his day, I think it was 2 years. By my time, I was the last generation that had the mandatory army service. 1 year. I'm not doing that. If I can go to university, for me, university meant sleeping until late for some of the days and just partying all night long, just party and pursuing pleasure. So I became his total kind of shadow side, opposite of my dad, to my own detriment. And this is when I realized that things are not working, because that feeling of fear of other men, I guess it really cemented itself when I was 15. I was aware of it from the beginning. I was like, I'm not masculine. I don't have that. Most people, not just men, but most people have ability. Most healthy people have the ability to draw boundaries with people. No, I don't like that. No, I don't agree with that. And they move on. I never had any of that. Because of my father's presence, he had plenty of that. But I couldn't be part of his world. I couldn't learn how to be like that. I always felt from very early on in life that if he saw how weak and unlike him I am, he would not like me as his son, which is not true. But that was my narrative because we didn't have intimacy. So when a boy is left with that void, he's left to his own conclusions. And they're very often, Robert Bly, who was the father of the men's movement in the, I think, 70s, 80s, and 90s. He, one of the pioneers, I would say, he said that when that vacuum is in the boy's soul, the vacuum is not filled with Disney characters. It's filled with demons. Literally, that's what he said. There are other forces that would answer the question for you. John Eldridge, who is based in Colorado, he said that every boy has a question. Am I strong, Daddy? Do I have what it takes to be a man? And Robert Bly said that question is, if it's not answered in the healthy way by the father, come here, son, I'll teach you how to be like me, basically. If it's not answered in practical ways, I'll take you camping, I'll take you walking, hunting, fishing, whatever, anything, playing chess, anything, just to be side by side with me. If that doesn't happen, the boy is like, yeah, there are other voices that fill the vacuum. No, you're not. You're not worthy, you're weak, you're soft, the opposite of the great man. And of course, these are lies, but we believe lies growing up. And my lies were really cemented to a point of deep self-hatred, almost so splitting, I would say, self-hatred, hatred. I was 15 when this guy gave me a black eye out in the village. I think it was the first evening that I went out during the summer vacation, the summer holidays. And I was a bit of a joker. I liked people. I liked the girls. I was never strong. And some people who had bullying tendencies, I guess, they would, that guy picked on me. Come on, have a drink. And I'm like, no. What did you say? Bam. And he gave me this black eye. I didn't fight back. Not because I couldn't. It wasn't a physical thing. He wasn't bigger, stronger, not even older, I don't think. I just didn't have the spirit, because you need to have a sense of you in order to draw the boundaries between someone else. And I was used to being this little formless creature, almost not a male or female. It's like a nothing, genderless, formless creature, and I wasn't good enough to be like other boys. I knew that from the beginning, and now I wasn't even good enough to be a man at 15, because I remember going home and thinking, I hope my dad doesn't see the little mark that I have. And he did, and he said, who did that? And I told him who did it, and he tried to encourage me, right? I mean, if, again, going back to some of the books that I've read on masculinity and some of the materials, if the first stages have been filled, so the first stage is like the precious son, the little boy, you're my boy. The second stage is the adventurer, the cowboy, and the third stage is the warrior. Come on, you're strong, you can fight. I'll teach you how to throw a punch. I'll teach you how to wrestle. I didn't have these three stages. Well, before the fourth, which is the warrior, right? And so when you've not been loved in your body, you don't feel that. I've never relaxed around that man's presence. Not even my mom, to be honest. Like both parents, it's just different relationship. It was very much practical, very cold in many ways. And again, I'm not here to blame my parents. We all broken. One day, my daughters will be dealing with their stuff, but the difference is that I would tell them, and I have already. We talk about the stuff where I've fallen short. Daddy didn't meet your needs here. I'm sorry, Daddy didn't handle your idea. And so that's not to say, oh, my parents are bad. No, not at all. They did their best, but it wasn't enough. And I don't think any parent is enough. And so that stage of the warrior, when I needed the warrior in me to be affirmed, to say, you can do this. That stage had nothing to rest on. The other stages have been kind of half filled, empty. And so my soul was kind of hollow inside. And when my dad said, oh, listen, you need to get these guys, right? Tomorrow, after tomorrow, get them one by one. And otherwise, they'll keep doing that to you. And to a point, I don't disagree with him, because we live in a small community. I'm not talking about violence. Violence is not good. But sometimes you need to defend / protect yourself. And if I've had that ability to draw boundaries, no one probably would have given me a black eye. Many of my friends didn't get black eyes.
Yeah.
They felt that thing from me, that there was no boundary, and so people would just cross over. And when my dad said, you need to get these guys, I remember just looking down, looking at my socks. I remember the color of my socks, and I just didn't want to be there, being watched by him. Because everything that was kind of worst about me, I realized is true. Everything I suspected, maybe I'm just this formless, weak male, but not masculine character. Not a real boy, a bit like Pinocchio, maybe. And then when he said, well, you need to get them. And when I realized, no, I don't have it in me. Then he said something that what made that rift, almost like an arrow, really, like a sword. It really cut me. He said, oh, don't worry. You're not built for that. I'll take care of it. Now, as soon as he said, you're not built for that, what is that? Oof, there was this division. And I remember after that, I couldn't even hear what he was saying. Almost like in the movies when you see a bomb goes off and you see people's lips are moving, but you can't hear because you're the one who's been affected by this explosion. And I remember just dissociating from myself and almost like speaking at myself, to myself, you little worm, you little formless, shapeless boy. I want to take you out of me and I want to destroy you, just get rid of you, kill you. And I want to grow up without you. And pretty much that's what I did. Literally the next day I started lifting weights. 5 years later, I had 10, 15 kilos more on my body, maybe even more. I had a shaved head and I was getting in danger, in trouble. I wasn't just fighting. No. I mean, serious things. I was getting in trouble with grown men. I was 19 and there were these 4 or 5 very serious guys in their 30s. And I got in this huge fight, like with all of them, knowing that it's not about the fight. I still didn't have, the irony is that no matter how big and strong I got, and no matter how much cocaine I took, the irony is that I never had, again, still didn't have that ability to be courageous, to say to another man or a person, no, this is my boundary. I don't agree with that. No, but the difference now is that I had more chances to die. I had more chances to get drunk and okay, these 10 guys, sure. Bring it on. And then I'll grab one of them and then they'll try to kick me and I emerge all like broken and bleeding. But the whole village like, whoa, this boy is crazy. You don't mess with this guy. And they left me alone. And ironically enough, I mean, some of this is not completely driven by bad motives, because I was left alone and I didn't go on to become a thug. But I paid the price, and many people paid the price as well. It was destruction. And later on, I went to the city again, when I went to university. Um, and that's when I started working on doors. Again, I didn't get a real job. I was hanging out in nightclubs anyway. So one of the bouncers who we knew said, "You guys are here every night. Why don't you just get a job here? You're big, strong guys." So I did. But I remember, by that time, I already had a shaved head and I had this scar that's still on my forehead, which is from a baseball bat back from the village. And people looked to me as if, he's a thug. And they didn't know that I was still very soft inside. And I didn't mind being soft, but I also liked that they left, at least in the facade was there. But I had to maintain it. And that's where the drugs, the cocaine, and the drink came in. And I was just pursuing pleasures, just trying to live that bliss, I guess. I lived at night, that bliss. And I met my wife, the girl who is now my wife. And she was different. She was the only person who saw something genuine in me behind the facade, saying, yeah, everyone is kind of, you guys are kind of these crazy people. And I was working for, my bosses were proper organized crime. So the people who own the security companies. And a few times we go with them and we look like mafia and drive their cars and things like that. Because they were mafia, let's face it. But I never really became a part of organized crime as such. I had friends who did. But still, it's a very dangerous proximity. Very dangerous. Some of those people had their names in the papers, that I've been in the room with. I'm like, wow, where am I now? And then my wife, she saw something genuine in me, and she said, "You're not like that. You're not like that." And I got quite shaken by that. And so, long story short, she was the one who sort of shook me a little bit. Now, by that time, I was 24. I was living the dream, you might say. I was 24. I lived in a big city by the seaside. And the person I worked for he just bought this big building, and he said, "You can go and clear out one of these old apartments in this building. You can live there rent free. You work for me." So I didn't even have to pay rent. I was driving a car. It's not even my car. It was his car, but I had access to it. So it was almost like, wow, life is so good. Like, it couldn't get any better. And then I met the girl, and and that turned everything upside down. Just when I thought life is perfect, life is smooth, life is level, I'm a good guy, I don't break the law, I don't do anything criminal. I wasn't at that point at all. And then the disruption came. You're living a false life. That's what my own conscience started to tell me. There is more to you, but you don't want to know. This is all false. Your pursuit of pleasure is just, it keeps you numb. And I said, okay, interesting. And so my girlfriend, we've only like dated for like a month, and then she started challenging me. She said, first of all, things like watching pornography, like first of all, like sleeping with as many women as you can. That's not like a real man's thing. And I said, oh, okay, interesting. And that really shook me. I said, yeah, maybe I can leave everyone else behind for her. That made sense. But then the second thing was like, yeah, but even watching pornography, which I didn't realize how addicted I was to the whole sex thing. It wasn't just porn addiction. It was like I would go out, and even if I what's the word, like a one night stand, even then I would still go home and watch porn. I was like completely hooked on the sexual experience, because deep down I was still hooked to the mother, hooked to the maternal. My father had not broken that cycle. And in my book, The Fatherhood and the Blueprint of Masculinity, I talk about how the masculine force needs to come in at some point and take the boy out. Otherwise, the boy will be hooked on the feminine. The boy is not going to let go, and the feminine doesn't let go. But the masculine must interrupt that cycle. And just like they do in some tribal cultures, even though they don't do it perfectly, but the pattern is right. Take the boy out and make him one of us, and not addicted to sucking milk. And there's a lot of that in the sexual addiction, just receiving from a female, from femininity. And so I started to become aware of my own, up until that point I didn't know that how messed up I was. And then I said, wow, okay, things really are wrong. And then when you try to go against the grain of who you've been all your life, then you realize how hard it is, how impossible it is in many ways. But I was willing, and she was also willing to give me a chance in many ways, because we were like, we love each other. How come we can't be together? Like, she was the only woman that I would actually argue with. I prided myself, I really did, of being the ultimate gentleman. Like, I would date all these women, and at that time, even like dating websites had just come up. And so I started to meet these girls like really on a kind of not daily basis, because I couldn't, but if I could, I would have. Almost like weekly basis. And then just have a date and just, wow. And I really got on with women. And then the only woman that I didn't get on with was the real substantial female presence that I actually wanted to be with, because she saw the reality about who I could be, but she challenged the stuff that I was not really. That's not out of my genuine self. It was just my addictions, my foolishness, my wrong choices. And then, and yet she's actually the only person that I want to be. So what do I do? For about 10 days, she said to me, well, she had traveled around the world. She was very unusual in so many ways. She had actually come back from America. She lived in different states for a while. And then she lived in Cyprus, in Greece. She's been around. And she said, I actually want to continue traveling. We're both the same age, like 24, 23, 24. Maybe you can join me, she said. And I'm like, wait a minute. Are you saying that? I mean, I built this life here. And are you saying that I can just go and now become a worker somewhere abroad, like working on the building site or a factory? No way. I'm not doing that. You're crazy. But she just left that with me. And then we were separated for a while because she went somewhere for like 10 days with her parents, I think. And for those 10 days, I was thinking very hard. And I remember one night, and while I was thinking, I started, because I lived in a different city, and I started to look back on my life. And I'm like, where I come from, almost like this nostalgic thing. Maybe I was someone with a bit more life in me. Maybe I did compromise. Maybe something about the way I live now is not quite alive in me. Maybe parts of me are not alive. And so I think, and I watched a movie that, one of the movies that I grew up watching, because on the 90s were an exciting time when it comes to television. Like the best movies came, and they would just rotate them pretty much on a weekly basis differently. And one of them was Good Will Hunting with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. And I watched that movie again, rewatched it in my 20s, just to remember some stuff. And I was shocked. The movie spoke to me. Like the end of the movie, I felt something was like alive, something nudged me in my heart and my spirit, if you will. It's like, look at what happened to the guy. Now, if you remember the story, the guy had this opportunity to make something of himself, like the opportunity of a lifetime, right? A bit like me. Not mine wasn't at a high level as him. I was not offered to become a millionaire or like a top scientist, but I was living rent-free. I didn't have to pay for a car in a big city, prosperous city, and a big resort. Every summer was full of tourists, and the nightlife was bustling. It was like perfect place for a young man. And yet, there was the call to adventure. Like, what's his name with the guy, the hero with 1,000 faces? Joseph Campbell. He would say that the call to adventure that disrupts your status quo. And watching that movie at the end, the guy said, you know what? Matt Damon said, I'm going to leave that opportunity. I'm going to go and pursue that girl. Literally, like in the last thing they say, I'm going to go and see about a girl. And you know what? I said to myself, maybe I can do the same. Maybe I've got enough guts and courage left in me to say, you know what? Maybe one day I'll be in my 50s, maybe 60s. Maybe I'll have a lot of money. Maybe I'll even have a good relationship with a woman. Maybe even many women, because for me at the time, that was kind of a paradise. Like just having access to love as I saw it. But I always regret it. Part of me would always say, what if you had taken that chance, George? What if you had left everything? Just to see if you can build something genuine, because this stuff is not genuine. And at the same time, also, things started to happen that almost like to show me, George, the ground you're sitting on is not great. There are cracks in it, and you might fall through. There was this, I got involved with this guy who was a real mafia, and they came looking for me from another city, and I saw them. I was in that restaurant, kind of like a slash club that my boss was owning, and I was in the office, and I saw them on the cameras, and I saw these 6 massive thugs, and I knew that they come for me, and that's never happened to me, and I was alone, and I felt really lonely that day. I said, oh my goodness, these guys will break my legs, but it wasn't. I escaped, I was saved, but I felt lonely, almost like part of me was grieving. Part of me was saying, George, what did you do to me? Like, why did you bring me to this danger? It's not like, what's your game? And danger and death, is this your game? To what end and why? And so I started to already feel a little bit, and even that girl, my girlfriend at the time, said, this is terrible. Like, what are you doing with these guys? Why you got involved with it? And so I had already seen a little bit of, okay, yeah, this is not sustainable. It's not even, I mean, I'm not a criminal, I'm not a gangster. Why did I get involved? with this dangerous situation. Long story short, having been dating only for a month, we bought a plane ticket and we just went to England. And that's when the adventure started, and it was the most painful adventure of my life. Now, a few years, like a decade and a half later, thank God, this was the best thing that happened to me. But especially the first 10 years, they were hell. Now, do you want me to tell you a little bit? Do you have any questions, or shall I just continue?
Well, so one of the things that strikes me, this like, man, this is a Matt Damon movie, almost, but how did most people that went through what you've gone through would end up in like a lifetime of therapy to undo, or not maybe undo, that's maybe not to process and work through in a positive way a better life than what your past would reflect. But because I know you've written 3 books, and Rise from the Ashes is the most recent one. How did you navigate all this and not end up in therapy, professional therapy with a psychiatrist or a psychologist? Because it's like your self-awareness and processing what was going on, I think is somewhat unique in the absence of professional intervention. So can you kind of give us a little insight to how'd you do that? That's the only way I could put it.
Great question. Yes, I did get a lot of help. It wasn't just traditional therapy, sitting and talking to someone, but especially after the first 2 years. So to begin with my therapeutic, if you will, healing journey. That's how I can call it, a healing journey. After 2 years of suffering and then trying to face my addictions, my wife had started. she had pushed me to go to church, a local Anglican church, and they had this thing that they had a connection to Zambia. They had some people who were doing missions over there, like Christian stuff. And I was not so much interested in the religious stuff, but I wasn't against it. I was just open to anything, but it wasn't relevant to my struggles, so I thought. And but I was attracted by the offer to go and help, and because I was big and I was strong, I had a personal training business. I said maybe I can go and teach, work in an orphanage for a while, teach those kids some things about exercise. And my wife was a lifeguard and a swimming teacher, so she taught them swimming. Now, because it was a beautiful location on the edge, the coast of Tanganyika Lake in Zambia. And we went there, and that's when, for about 20 days, it was amazing. It was amazing. That's when I felt something was calling to me. Something was calling back to me. Because when I was in Bulgaria, one thing that I lost after I started getting in trouble, especially from the moment I was 15, the nature, the love for nature. I remember that day when I got the black eye and when I started lifting weights, I stopped going fishing. I used to go fishing in the local river like almost daily in the summer vacation. I lost that. I didn't go to the woods, didn't go fishing. And if you see where I come from, it's nature everywhere. Even to this day, when I go there in the summer, as I do, at night you open the window and you hear the owls, you hear the jackals up the hill howling. It's just beautiful. It's just full of life. And I lost that. That was gone. And when I went to Zambia, I had become this big hulking guy with a shaved head and with the image that wasn't really me. I could see at night this beautiful flashing dots moving in the lake, and I knew this was the eyes of the crocodiles. There was something surreal about that. I say, where am I? Owls. And of course, Africa was a place that we grew up watching National Geographic about, but we never thought, we thought it was like a different world. It's not people like us. We don't travel that far. Nobody's going to ever go to Africa. Just like a mythical world somewhere. And here I was. Wow. So the sense of wonder started to come back a little bit. And at the end of my travel, actually, there was this preacher who was almost like a divinely orchestrated thing and he ended up praying for me, and I ended up crying, like pulling my eyes out. But it wasn't like I had a religious experience so much as I had returned to the child in me that I hated so much. And it's fascinating when you look at the word repent, what it means. It doesn't mean say I'm sorry. It means turn around, change your mind about where you've been going, turn around. So I turned around to who I was. I said, what have I done to that little boy? I beat him up. I bruised him. I literally got him in trouble so many times. I wanted to kill him. I got in like car accident, being hit with baseball bats, being in fights with like 10, 15 men, hit with bottles, all sorts of stupid stuff like that. And, but I want you back. And, people would very often argue saying, well, you need to turn to God and God is like out there. But in my case, it's almost like he was waiting for me back there. Whatever force you call God, it was like he was there with that little child. I was the one who had gone and I had to come back. From that moment on, everything was different. I come back to England on that flight, literally the same day, after being crying for like an hour. And the first thing I started to do is like look up the animals that I grew up exploring, look them up and download them on my computer before I had a smartphone, and just and start buying DVDs, like wildlife DVDs, and just watching them with my wife. And just, it was just so I started to wake up. And then I started to read books about, so every time when I come again, oh, well, maybe I'm still watching a bit of porn. Oh, maybe I'm still quite lustful, Oh, well, how do I overcome that? So I start buying books. And mentors would come my way, mentors who are in my life to this day. And also I became, in talking like in the next 5 years or so, I became a member of this local men's group. And eventually I even got into therapy. I did like 6 months of proper counseling with a lovely older American gentleman, actually from Kansas, who was living, and I think as far as I know still is living, in Sussex here. And so coaching, therapy, mentoring, but it wasn't just one thing. I did a bit of everything. And also I was mentored by my friend who is an older, interesting enough, he's born the same year as my father, and he taught me some physical stuff because he used to be a PE teacher, physical education teacher. He taught me how to swim about exactly 10 years ago because I couldn't. I was this big guy, muscle bound, but I had this fear because I'd grown up not trusting. I couldn't relax. I couldn't float. And I spent like a week at his house with a swimming pool. And the first day, a few days, I would just put my face in the water. And he said, just breathe. See, how does that feel? Familiarize with yourself. You can let go. You'll be safe. So a lot of it was mental/spiritual game. And then eventually I learned how to swim. I'm not a great swimmer, but I can enjoy the sea now. I live by the sea pretty much. And I can go for a swim now. But I learned that in my 30s. And then another thing I did is I joined the boxing class because lifting those weights and getting in trouble with all those things was just avoiding the legitimate conflict that I learned. You can do that. You can have a sparring with another man. You'll be fine. And my propensity for violence, hiding behind the violence, was the opposite thing. I can't hold my own, but I can be dangerous and violent. I can draw weapons. I can fight with 10 men because I know I'm going to lose, but I'll be the crazy guy. And yet in the boxing ring, like, it's just me and you here. And it is scary. Of course it's scary. But I did it for a while just to learn it's okay. You'll be fine. And then I started dropping the weight as I learned to swim, as I started doing more like outdoor activities. I started fishing as well. That came back to me not that long ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I started going fishing, shooting. So walking, some things like nature came back to me in full swing. And in fact, greater than it has been before in many ways. And as that went on, my physical body I started to drop the weight. I didn't need to lift these heavy weights. I was really overdoing it. And, even though now I'm in my early 40s and my body is full of pain because of the abuse, I'm probably healthier than I was before. I don't have the high blood pressure that I did before, that's for sure, because I was just eating everything and I was just massive, 92 kilos, just a big guy. And and now, so I guess to answer your question, many factors came together. So men's group, therapy, few retreats. I've done a few retreats. Like one of them was like John Eldridge. Another one was similar type when we went to the Highlands in Scotland with a bunch of guys, climbed the second highest peak, which was like, wow, out of this world. It's not something I would do naturally. That's not me. But I had to do it to challenge myself. And I remember coming back and my wife said, after this weekend, my wife said, you feel a bit lighter, like something is dropped, because I felt I could do that. I can do it. I always felt like a failure. I couldn't see things through the end. And doing for a man is very important that it is a physical element of recovery, like with the swimming. For example, I didn't even finish my university course in Bulgaria. I'm doing it now, here online, studying criminology and psychology in a British university, because I want to finish it. I want to get that bachelor degree, and I have one more year left. But I should have done that in my 20s, but I didn't. So when I was learning how to swim, my friend who was teaching me said, okay, hold your breath, go all the way around. And I would always come up short. And he said, what happened? And I would just say the same thing, it's too hard. And he said, like your education. Like you did 4 years, you completed them, and you gave up right before the end. And the narrative in my mind is too hard. I can't do it. I can't do it. And then that's why I climbed the mountains, and that's why I did these things. When I went to the top of that mountain, I cried. I started to cry, because almost like there was a voice saying, you see, just look how far you've come. You can do it. You can do it. You just did it. And that's why I did many things like that. Some of it, to begin with, my healing was spiritual. Second was emotional. But then some of it was physical. And I just described a tiny bit of that. The physical bit was the least in terms of time and effort. Most of it was emotional and spiritual, but also there was a physical element. So that's the, in a nutshell, the recovery.
Yeah. So I guess this kind of leads to the next question. Are those 3 of the 4 steps that you talk about in rising from the ashes, and I want to touch on what you're doing professionally, your career of, I call it working and sharing with the least, the last, and the lost in society. It was all that you just shared. It was that to prepare you for what you're doing now in a professional career arena. But before, so now I'm asking 2 questions in one, and gone down 2 different rabbit holes. So let's do the first rabbit hole. The rising from the ashes, and you talk about 4 steps. Like, I think it's like you said, an hour a day. That to get your life back. What's that about?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I mean, this little book, Rise from the Ashes, this came out of, because as you can see, things are complex, and I like to do everything justice. I can't just say, oh, well, do these 3 things and your life will be fine. It doesn't work this way. And even my journey now that we've been talking for more than half an hour, this is only scratching the surface. There's a process to everything. But I was working in this place called the Phoenix Project, which where we help vulnerable young people at risk of homelessness, all sorts, on the criminal side, on the mental health side, all sorts, who had one thing in common: they needed a home, temporary home. And some of them I really got to know, and I did some boxing, some training with them. And I was thinking, okay, I already have some writing about masculinity and about the father wound, the mother wound. I got some ebooks, but they're not going to read this deep stuff. How can I help them? And so I typed up a document, which I said, okay, you know what? If they follow this, if they do these 4 things, which I know to be steps that are working, and if they do it 15 minutes a day, even 4 times a week, so that's like an hour a week. If they do this, just that, their lives will start to improve. And since this was called the Phoenix Project, Rise from the Ashes made a natural title. And I kept typing, and it kind of became a book. It's a very tiny book. You can read that in an hour. But the steps are, let me just read them out to you. So the first step is called Let It All Out. One session that frees you from your past. So, and then there is a quote by a therapist that did some work with the body through emotion, saying, it is only by making the past alive again for a person that a true growth in the present is facilitated. If the past is cut off, the future does not exist. Now, that doesn't mean dwell in the past, live there. It just means that the emotions that your past have left you with, they need to come out. And most people never go there, because it's easier to blame your girlfriend. It's easier to come home and slam the door, like some of these young people have done. Oh, it's the world's fault. It's my teacher's fault. It's your fault. It's my mom's fault. Instead of saying, well, wait a minute, nobody makes you feel this stuff. That stuff is in you, and it's your past, your history. It is probably your parents, but not your parents today. Before, speak to them, hit your pillow, go in and punch the boxing bag. I don't care what it is. Let it all out, but don't blame people in the present today. This is in your body. So your body needs to express that stuff. And that's step 1. Step 2, reclaim your inner child. And it is basically talking about how what I basically described with me. I had to go, and it's called one session of practicing a lost art from your childhood. So I had to reclaim fishing, the shooting, the nature, swimming, pretty much stuff that I couldn't even do swimming, but I wanted to, I guess, as a boy. So I had to go back and give that boy what he couldn't do, or what I had deprived him of. And that's it. Art, paint, draw, dance, anything that's been cut off from you, go back and reclaim it, because that's your inner child. And then again, there's a quote. It's called, by Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. He said, "Who we are in the present includes who we were in the past." We can't run away from that child. We might abuse him, hate him because he's addicted, or maybe he's whatever he is, but he's inside of us. We need to do work with him. We need to befriend him and help him.
Can
And
before you go to step 3, I just got to share this. When you said that, I had a traumatic brain injury in second grade, so I don't remember a lot of my past, or at least I can't picture it. But I distinctly remember talking about reclaiming something from the past, which would require me to like actually go get a bicycle. I remember when I was, 8 years old, riding down the street on my bicycle with no hands, on the steering wheel, and spitting off to the side. And I did that as I was passing our house, and my mom saw me. When I came in, she gave me the what for and washed my mouth out with soap. How dare you be out there spitting while you're riding your bike and people could see that. and I got in trouble for that. And you know what? In hindsight, it kind of took away my love for riding a bike, because I can't remember the last time I actually owned a bike and rode it. Certainly not in my adult life. But when you were sharing that, I just had to tell you, it took me to that memory, and to, like you say, reclaim or relive it is one of the steps in, I guess, acknowledging the past but not living in the past.
yeah,
Kind of deal. So I'm sorry for cutting you off, because man, you're on a great roll and I'm following along, but I just had to share that story because nobody else in the world, my mom's not even alive, my sister probably doesn't remember it, but nobody else in the world knew I got my mouth washed out with soap for spitting while riding my bicycle hands free. so that was a total squirrel running across the backyard moment. So step 3. So you got, retrieving, if you will, your childhood. What's step 3?
well, first, thanks for sharing that story. That's amazing. And I would encourage you, go get that bike.
At my age, I'd probably fall off and get another traumatic brain injury.
And there's a quote in the beginning as well, from step 2, by Coleridge, the famous poet Coleridge, saying, "Genius is the power of carrying the feelings of childhood into the powers of manhood," which he means adulthood, which I found powerful. So step 3 is shift your mindset. And let me see if I can. One sec. And I call this one session of imagining your best future. Because once you've done this work, the emotional work, to bring back the emotion of your past and express it, and then to start playing the way you couldn't play before those emotions were expressed. So that's great, the first 2 steps. The third step is very hard. It's very hard because, at least in my case, I was more comfortable with the therapeutic work, with emotional work, than actual practical. But can you imagine where you want to be in life? I know what I want. Most people know what they don't want to be. They don't want to get sick. They don't want to be poor. They don't want to get cancer, whatever. But a child doesn't live like that. A child is, I want to be great one day, and then we lose that. Life takes this away from us. We need to get it back. Envision where you want to be. Envision the business you want to run, or the spouse you want to have, or the grandkids you want to have. the money, the health, whatever it is, you have to know in your mind where you're going. And when you study the lives of anyone who's ever been anyone in the world, made anything for the better, like from Winston Churchill to Martin Luther King, anyone, they had that. They knew where they were going. They knew where they were taking the people they were leading. They knew it. They didn't just fight against something out of hatred. No. They were doing it out of love. We're going to a better place. And so I have another 2 quotes in the beginning. Imagination is the preview of life's coming attractions. Albert Einstein. Isn't it interesting, because he's the one with the brain, right? We think Einstein, the brain, but he's the one who says that imagination actually is greater than knowledge. Imagination. All the great inventions, they don't come from knowledge. They come from someone being able to imagine it. And then the other quote is, your thoughts are the architect of your destiny. And so this is about envisioning where you want to be. And on a bad day, if I wake up, everything hurts, my shoulder, my knee, my back hurts, kids are arguing with each other, and I've not even got out of bed yet. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm tired. I just want to stay. I find that very hard to not be negative. But remembering this, what I do is like, well, let me get up. I open the curtains. I see the sky. I'm like, wow, it's beautiful. I mean, the family is healthy. Beautiful sky. We live in a beautiful place of the world. Peaceful. Can hear the birds. Even if it's raining, it's still beautiful because I can see the sky and the drops falling from the sky, and there's so much to be grateful for. And that changes it for me. Like, now I've got more resilience to get on with my day because I'm in a good place. Life is a good thing, despite the bad stuff, despite the tragedy and the loss. Most of it isn't. I think that the losses and the darkness of life would rather want to get us to agree with the darkness. Oh, life's bad. Life is bad. Bad things will happen. Life is bad. But no, I don't agree with that. In my mind, saying no. Despite the bad things that have happened, most of it is very good. We live in an enchanted world. And the last chapter is act as your future self. And I call that one small step of faith toward your best future. And there's a quote by Churchill saying, the chain of destiny can only be grasped one link at a time. So you need to take one small step in order to get to your destiny, basically. And I start this chapter by saying, imagine for a moment what your life would look like if, A, you had never suffered the pain and trauma that ended up negatively shaping you into the person you are today. B, you had all the energy, motivation, creativity, and resilience of the person you would have been had it not been for those factors. What would you do if that was true? Who would you be if you could still be that person before trauma and darkness and loss and just life took the energy and the vitality and the imagination away? Could you imagine? Okay, well, in that case, take one step towards that today. It might be like apply for that job. Just press apply and start applying. The job that scares you, the job that is, oh, that's too big for me. But actually deep down you want to do. Or approach that person that you want to date. For people who are single, oh, no, I can never talk to her. Go and do it. If you believe that you are someone, if you believe that there's more to you, that something's been taken away from you by trauma, by life, by choices, by your parents, by the world, you can get it back. But you need to start making different choices. You need to start living, surround yourself with different people than the person that you used to be was surrounded with. I'm not saying cut off your friends. I'm just saying add things that the future version of you would benefit from. And basically, that's the book.
Wow. Step 4, and I'm writing notes as you were talking, and here's what came to mind for me picturing step 4 is imagine the apostles in 3 years, all the things they saw, all the great things they saw, even the great things they were able to do, because Christ sent out the 72 disciples, sent out the apostles, and they performed miracles. They cured people. They raised people from the dead. They expelled demons. For 3 years, it's like, dude, we are with the greatest person ever in the whole world. And even Peter recognized who Christ was when they're in the town of Philippi, who do you say that I am? And then they hit Good Friday. And that imagine what your step 4 is. What does your future look like? And if you intentionally live your life with, yeah, we're all going to have Good Fridays, and we could have a lot of them, a lot of tragedy, a lot of agony, a lot of grief, but there's an Easter Sunday. That kind of intentional living, and doing the other 3 steps. It's not just independent. Step 4 is not just independent of the first 3 steps you talk about, but that progression. What an incredible way to restore. When you were, I'm just like following your story, and I'm going, oh man, this is a story of the prodigal son, or your badass bodybuilding, or weightlifting and bouncer, and I'm gonna fight the whole world. I'm like, oh, that was Saul before he got knocked off his horse, and how you can relate your modern day personal experiences and journey and be able to grasp, because I know you're a man of faith now. You've given sermons in your church, and you're working with these folks who are walking through their valley of death, if you want to call it that. They're in that season of what more could go wrong in my life, and you're spending that time, and you work for. You're not working for the government. I know the people that are on probation, Ministry of Justice. You're in the kind of the private sector, if I'm correct, or no?
No, this is the government.
Okay, all right.
And that's why I can't talk about my job in detail too much.
Okay. Well, then we won't go down that path. But you're being able to relate to people because you've lived that similar experience, and as the classic saying goes, but for the grace of God, you could be that guy that's on probation and or that homeless person who has no hope and nothing to look forward to. How can people get a hold of your book, your Rising from the Ashes, and then you have two or three other books that are on Amazon as well, right?
On paper, I've got 2. So it's
Okay.
Rise from the Ashes, the little self-help book, which is the only thing I've written that's not just for men. And another one is called The Father Wound and the Blueprint for Masculinity.
The father wounds.
The Father Wound and the Blueprint for Masculinity. And if you type my name in Amazon, that will come up. And I think I'm very lucky, blessed to have an unusual name, even for Bulgarians. I don't think there are many George Stoimenov out there. But also I have a website called Men's Corner. So menscorner.co.uk.
Men's Corner. Say it again.
menscorner.co.uk.
Awesome.
My books are on Amazon.
Awesome. Man, I'm really struggling here. I had already named a title for this episode, and now I'm like, man, Pat, that doesn't do it justice. I don't know. If you were to go, oh, Pat, you ought to title this episode, what would it be? This is coming out of left. I'm zinging you with this. I'm putting a lot of pressure on you, but I have so many notes, and I'm just like, holy cow! I got like 5 or 6 different things and thinking to name this episode. So I'm going to get your input. What would you call this episode?
I guess it would be something to do with playing a part in your own resurrection, because even people who believe in the resurrection, like of Christ, they're just waiting for things to happen to them. And some people, God seems to bless them. Other people, God doesn't seem to bless them. It's not like that at all. If you want your life to be resurrected, you need to play a part. And it can be. And you don't even have to label yourself as a believer in this or that. If you follow these things, you will end up being aware of that power that's greater than you. And because that's basically what happened to me. I just wanted to try out what worked. And I ended up becoming more and more resurrected in some ways. And so the power of the resurrection is more real to me than anything else. But I had to go through death.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a person of faith to appreciate the parable of the prodigal son. I mean, that sounds like so much, and particularly people that are in my age bracket that matured in the late 60s, early 70s, and all that, all that chaos that was, people were trying to find peace, the peaceniks and all sorts of stuff that did not work. I mean, one of the worst, my mom actually made me read it. In hindsight, one of the worst books I think I ever read was, I think it was called I'm Okay, You're Okay. And to me, it fed that mindset of don't offend other people, don't don't be different. It's like, you can, pardon this expression, you can coexist with everybody. And the reality is, no, you can't. You have to have barriers. You have to have boundaries in your life. Otherwise, you're going to drown in chaos.
Absolutely. We talked about my lack of boundaries earlier. That nearly got me in physical death. And I'm not a fan of labels, but I've got a very strong internal life that I protect. And in this book, The Father Wound and the Blueprint of Masculinity, I actually have a whole chapter of, and I preface it, make of this what you will. There's a chapter of meeting God as a father, called Meeting the Father, because I had a moment in my journey of faith in Zambia where I felt, wow, okay, whatever this experience, is it like born again? Is it like new life? I want it, yes. But then a few years later, I think 3 years later or 4, I had to meet God as a father, and that masculine love came flooding into my body. There's no other way to put that, and that will polarize people. That will, because even in this book, again, this is not a religious book. It's not doesn't have a label, but I make a distinction and say, what happened to our world? How do we relate to masculinity? Just look at churches. It's all about Jesus, but it's not enough about the Father. And it's like, it used to be the other way around. And now Jesus is like, he forgives everything. He loves you no matter what you are, who you are. But I don't want to be loved no matter what I do or where I'm in life. I want change. I want to be everything that I could be. And that's where a father love comes in. And a father love is critical. It's very much, it's sharp like a sword. It's like divides you from your motives and what's good and what's not pure. And so after I'd met God as a father, I had a vision. I had a vision, and him hugging me and me crying. I could feel. It sounds weird and spooky, and I don't have this every day. I don't have these visions. I've had a few over the years, but it's not a daily thing. But I could feel almost like his neck, his whiskers. I could feel that masculine love that I didn't have, and I was different afterwards. In my body, something changed. So, I mean, Jesus said, "You shall know them by their fruits." Maybe if people say, "Oh, you're making this up," okay, but my life was different afterwards. What's the fruits of that? The fruit is that I felt belonging in my own body, which I didn't have earlier on. Like an hour earlier, I was somewhere else, and I had this one. Literally that evening, I was watching a movie, and I felt, wow, I watched the same movie that I watched before. I feel totally different. I feel like I belong now. So it's very polarizing. God is a father, but again, that's my thing. It is what it is.
Yeah, and it's not just, masculinity isn't just about fathers and sons. I have 3 daughters and 2 sons, and that how you have your daughters, and how your daughters will come to you and as their dad, and they share some struggle or something that's going on in their life. I learned the hard way that they don't want you to tell them what to do. They are coming to you, or your wife shares some sort of Google. It's not about the nail. Google that.
I've heard about that.
Yeah, Google that. It's the best example of how men need, and particularly even though it's not about the nail, it's not about a father. It's about a adult relationship, man and woman. But your daughters come to you as their father because they want to be heard, and sometimes they just want to be hugged. They just want somebody to listen. And then you need to learn to ask the question, how can I help? As opposed to, well, this is what you ought to do, type deal. And that I'm 100% Irish. I'm an immigrant like you, but an immigrant from Ireland to the United States. And honest to God, I think it's genetic that the Irish grow up going, hey, just ignore a problem long enough and maybe it will go away. That's not a healthy way of dealing with challenges or adversity or conflict or whatever. That you need to learn how to stand up for yourself. You need to learn how to communicate respectfully and get resolutions to issues and conflicts in your life, whether it's in your personal or professional life. And but back to my original question point is, you just gave me the title for today's episode, and I am now going to change it to play a part in your own resurrection. I think that encapsulates your journey, that you weren't just a bystander in the stands. You actually got into the arena instead of standing by and letting things happen to you or in front of you, and you actively have played a part in your resurrection, your restoration, your change, whatever you want to call it. But I love that as a title, so that's where we're going to go.
Awesome.
Man, I'll tell you what, is there a fourth book in the works?
I've got some other books that I'm eventually I'll go back. So I've got some ebooks. This whole thing started as ebooks. And the first one was The Father Wound. It was a tiny book. But then I went back a few years ago and I expanded it, I revised it, and I published it in paper. And the second one is The Recovery of the Inner Boy, which I will do the same with eventually. But you can still get it as an ebook. It's just a lot shorter than what it will be one day. And the third one is called Reclaiming Courage, like let the lion roar. So it's about reclaiming anger and passion and use it for good, because very often good men are just quiet, and it's the bad guys who have command of that aggression. And I argue that no, aggression is good. It's how you use it. Because I grew up with someone never having aggression, and it didn't get me very far. So healthy aggression is good if you channel it right.
And those are ebooks, so they can get those on Amazon. Ebook. Awesome. Wow. I'll tell you what, man, we're going to have you back. This was a fascinating conversation, and I'm saying this in a very, very positive way. I was so enthralled in listening to you. This is the quietest I've ever been on a podcast, because I'm taking notes and just learning so much from you, and even reflecting, back on my almost 69 years on this planet. So, man, thank you so much for your authenticity, your willingness to share your story. For our audience, thank you. Because of you, we're now in 75 countries plus Hong Kong, and we're growing a community of like-minded warrior servants and leaders, because you're committed to that mindset and you're sharing it with folks need to hear it. So thank you so much. And as I close every episode with this advice, this challenge. Always, always, always strive to do the right thing at the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons, because that's what warrior servants and leaders do every day, every time. Until next week, love you all, and share this message with somebody that needs to hear it, and reach out to George and learn more of his story. And I'll tell you what, I'd be jumping on those ebooks real quick, as well as Rising from the Ashes. Man, you're going to walk away a renewed individual. So thanks to everybody. George, we're going to get you back on, and we're going to talk some more.
Thanks so much for having me.